Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. Now Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople.
Actually, the change only happened in 1930, which means that Istanbul has only been Istanbul and not Constantinople for 5% of its existence.
Now it's Turkish delight on a moonlit night.
Turkish delight is a dessert made almost entirely out of sugar and dried fruit or nuts. As for the moonlit night, the light and air pollution is quite high in Istanbul as of 2009, so not as majestic as a moonlit night might sound.
Every gal in Constantinople lives in Istanbul. Now Constantinople.
Actually, women probably would most likely want to live in Istanbul, because in the 1930s, while the city was still named Constantinople, most of Turkey was under Sharia law, which meant that women couldn't really do much. During the Ataturk era, they were granted many rights that they didn't have before the 1930s.
So if you've a date in Constantinople, she'll be waiting in Istanbul. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam.
This is actually true. New York was once a Dutch colony called New Amsterdam. In 1664, the colony was surrendered to the English after the English rolled up with some big ships with big guns and demanded the colony.
Why they changed it, I can't say. People just liked it better that way.
The change of the name to New York was because of the aforementioned change in hands of the settlements from the Dutch to the English. The English wanted it because it was already a large port city and partook largely in the valuable fur trade. The name New York comes from the Duke of York, the king's brother, who the king gave the city to. Change of hands from the city was mostly fine with the Dutch population, as they didn't like Peter Stuyvesant, who was the leader, all that much.
So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone, Constantinople.
Another interpretation of this line is that they were referring to how the Ottoman Empire was crumbling, and that it was going to collapse. For a time, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe, in reference to the fact that it was close to dying.
Why did Constantinople get the works?
The fall of the Ottoman Empire and its conversion in modern-day Turkey is quite a long story, but the main parts are as follows. The collapse of the old Ottoman Empire and the takeover of the Young Turks, and then their failure, and the country consequently turning over to Ataturk, and him ushering in a new era of progress. Constantinople was actually spared most of the turmoil that flooded the rest of Turkey in the early 1900s. It was never invaded by foreign powers.
That's nobody's business but the Turks.
As I said earlier, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe, and so the colonial powers at the time were greatly interested in dividing up the Ottomans' land. This land grab was one of the greatest opportunities for the colonial powers of the time to get valuable territory. In fact, the powers of Europe actually divided up and took some Ottoman land before the empire even collapsed.
Istanbul. Istanbul. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. You just liked it better that way. Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. Now Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople.
Constantinople remains to be known as one of the greatest cities of the classical era, along with Rome, Cairo, and Alexandria, and others. This may be why it is seen as a city of the ancients, and not the modern city that it is today. This line makes it seem like Constantinople just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Why did Constantinople get the works?
Throughout the modern era, Constantinople didn't actually suffer that much. It really only got trashed during the Crusades.
That's nobody's business but the Turks.
The Ottoman Empire was the central power of the Islamic world in the early 1900s, and with Ataturk's removal of the Caliphate, who was a very important figure in the Islamic world, what happened to Turkey was very much other people's business.
So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get?
Much of the city's history is still on display in various museums. Istanbul has around 80 museums. This is one way to see the history of the city.
The works? That's nobody's business but the Turks.
The other reason that it would not have just been the Turks' business is that the Young Turks, who were a political party at the time, brought the country into many wars and committed horrific atrocities against their Baltic territories.
Istanbul.